Gold Thread Studios. Gangnam Nights. Episode 1. Coffee in the Rain. The city wakes. Opening theme. Soft rain. A distant subway train. A mellow reggae guitar plays a simple four-note melody. A single Korean string instrument answers. The music settles beneath the narrator's voice. Every night, Gangnam tells a different story. This is one of them. There are people who believe they know Gangnam. They know the luxury boutiques, the glass towers, the imported sports cars waiting patiently at traffic lights, and the rooftop restaurants where the skyline stretches endlessly into the night. But cities rarely reveal themselves to people who are in a hurry. Their truest stories live somewhere quieter. In neighborhood cafes, in apartment kitchens, in subway stations where strangers pass each other without realizing that destiny is only a few steps away. Tonight, our story begins with rain. Morning arrived wrapped in silver clouds. Rain tapped gently against apartment windows across Seoul, washing yesterday from the streets and leaving the sidewalks polished like black glass. Inside a modest apartment tucked between an old bakery and a family-owned stationery shop, the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the air. It mixed with thyme, ginger, and Scotch bonnet peppers, the unmistakable aroma of a Jamaican kitchen that had learned to speak Korean. Soft reggae music floated from a small speaker on the windowsill. Not loud enough to wake the neighbors, just enough to remind the apartment where part of its heart had come from. Debbie Seo stood at the stove, stirring breakfast while humming with the music. Her curls were gathered into a loose bun, although several determined strands had already escaped and framed her face. She wore an oversized university sweatshirt, striped pajama pants, and slippers that had clearly survived many winters. She looked nothing like the polished professionals filling Seoul's skyscrapers. She preferred it that way. Steam curled toward the ceiling as she reached for another pinch of seasoning. Behind her, a familiar voice laughed. "You season food like you're negotiating peace between countries." Debbie smiled without turning around. "Mom, food deserves patience." Marcia Seo folded her arms. "I'm almost certain no cookbook has ever said that." "No," Debbie said, grinning. "But Grandma Brown did." Marcia laughed immediately. "And your grandmother won every argument she ever started." For a moment, time seemed to pause. Rain against the windows. Reggae drifting through the apartment. Breakfast filling the air with warmth. A tiny corner of Seoul carrying the heartbeat of Kingston. The empty chair. The apartment wasn't large. It didn't need to be. Every shelf carried memories instead of decorations. Family photographs rested beside tiny potted plants Debbie insisted made the apartment feel alive. Near the dining table hung a framed photograph of a smiling man in a dark suit. Seo Min-jae, Debbie's father. Every morning, without saying a word, Marcia placed an extra pair of chopsticks beside his photograph before breakfast. She had done it for years. Not because she believed he would suddenly walk through the front door. Because love sometimes survives by refusing to erase the habits it once created. Debbie noticed. She always noticed. But she had stopped asking questions long ago. Some questions carried too much weight for an ordinary Wednesday morning. June wandered into the kitchen rubbing sleep from his eyes, a camera hanging around his neck. "You slept wearing your camera again?" Debbie asked. "I forgot it was there." "You say that every week." "It inspires me. It also leaves interesting marks on your neck." June laughed. "Art requires sacrifice." Marcia placed another plate on the table. "You two haven't even eaten yet, and you're already arguing." "We're bonding," Debbie replied. "No," June corrected. "She's losing." Breakfast began. Phones stayed off. The television stayed silent. For 20 minutes every morning, the Seo family belonged only to one another. It was a promise Marcia had made after Min-jae disappeared. "If this family loses everything else, we won't lose breakfast together." Debbie hadn't understood those words when she was 6. Now she understood them perfectly. Marcia poured steaming tea into 3 small ceramic cups. The familiar fragrance of jasmine drifted gently across the table. For a few moments, no one spoke. Outside, rain traced winding paths down the apartment window. Inside, The only sounds were quiet laughter, clinking chopsticks, and the comforting rhythm of a family that had learned to treasure ordinary mornings. Debbie broke the silence first. "I've got a presentation this afternoon." June looked up from his rice. "The coffee campaign?" She nodded. "If they don't like the slogan, we'll probably spend another week pretending to brainstorm before choosing the first idea anyway." Marcia smiled knowingly. "So corporate life is exactly the same in every country." "It really is." June chuckled. "I could save your company a fortune. Just put a sticky note on the meeting room wall." "What would it say?" The first idea was probably the best one. Debbie laughed so hard she nearly dropped her chopsticks. "I'm writing that down. You'll make millions. I'll give you 5%. I was thinking 20. You negotiate like a lawyer." "I watch documentaries." Marcia shook her head, smiling into her tea. "No, you negotiate like your father." The room grew quiet again. Not heavy, just thoughtful. Debbie's smile softened. "Dad always negotiated?" Marcia nodded. He believed every disagreement ended better if everyone left with their dignity, even when he knew he was right. Debbie followed her mother's eyes to the photograph. She wished she could remember more than fragments. A deep laugh. Strong hands lifting her onto his shoulders. The smell of rain on his jacket. Everything else had faded with time. June noticed his sister drifting into memory. He gently nudged her shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah, I was thinking about Dad. I wish I'd known him longer." Debbie reached over and squeezed her brother's hand. "You know him. You laugh exactly like he did." June smiled. "Really?" Marcia answered before Debbie could. "Exactly. And when you're concentrating, you get the same little crease between your eyebrows." June immediately relaxed his face. "I do not." "You absolutely do." The three of them laughed again. The heaviness lifted. Not because the sadness disappeared, but because love had learned to live beside it. Debbie glanced at the clock. Her eyes widened. "I'm late." "You say that every morning," June replied. "One morning I'll surprise everyone." "When?" "I'll let you know." She hurried toward the hallway, nearly forgetting her umbrella. Marcia called after her. "Debbie." She turned. Her mother walked over and quietly buttoned the top button of her trench coat. "You've forgotten this every rainy day since high school." Debbie looked down. "I did it again." "You did." Marcia brushed an imaginary speck of lint from her daughter's shoulder. "Be kind today." Debbie laughed. "When am I not?" Marcia's expression softened. "Kindness isn't measured on easy days. It's measured on difficult ones." Debbie nodded. "I'll remember." She kissed her mother on the cheek, tapped June lightly on the head as she passed, and stepped into the hallway. The apartment door closed gently behind her. Inside the apartment, Marcia stood by the window watching her daughter disappear beneath a black umbrella. June quietly joined her. "You worry," he said. "I always will." "She'll be okay." Marcia smiled. "I know." She looked toward Min-jae's photograph. "I just wish." June finished the sentence. "That Dad could see her." Marcia nodded. "So do I." Outside, Debbie stepped into the rain. She had no idea that before the day was over, she would meet someone who would quietly begin changing the course of her life. Across the city, a man in a charcoal suit was leaving his own home, completely unaware that destiny had already chosen the exact intersection where their paths would cross. The city that never truly hurries. The apartment building stood on a quiet side street where old Seoul still whispered beneath the glass towers of Gangnam. The neighborhood wasn't famous. It didn't appear in travel magazines. No tour buses ever stopped there. And that was exactly why Debbie loved it. She believed cities revealed their hearts in places tourists never thought to look. As she stepped outside, the cool morning air greeted her with the scent of wet pavement and freshly baked bread drifting from the bakery across the street. Mr. Han, the baker, was already arranging warm loaves behind the front window. Without looking up, he lifted one hand. "Running late again, Devin?" Debbie laughed. "I prefer to think of myself as fashionably unpredictable." Mr. Han shook his head with a smile. "You've been fashionably unpredictable every Tuesday for 3 years." "It's Wednesday." He paused. Then I'm getting old. You've been saying that since I was 12. And you still haven't learned not to argue with your elders. I learned. She winked. I just ignore the lesson. The old baker laughed so loudly that 2 customers turned to see what was so funny. Debbie bowed before hurrying away. Halfway down the block stood a tiny flower shop no wider than a city bus. Outside, Mrs. Yoon carefully arranged buckets of fresh hydrangeas despite the rain. Debbie slowed. They're beautiful. Mrs. Yoon smiled without looking up. Flowers don't care about the weather. No, they bloom anyway. Debbie repeated the sentence quietly. They bloom anyway. She opened her notebook. On a page already crowded with observations, she wrote, "Flowers don't wait for perfect weather." She underlined it once, closed the notebook, and continued walking. The subway entrance swallowed the city one step at a time. The familiar electronic melody announced the arrival of another train. People poured through the gates with practiced precision. Students, office workers, construction crews, grandparents carrying shopping bags. Everyone moving, yet somehow never colliding. Debbie often imagined Seoul as a giant heartbeat. Millions of people moving independently while somehow creating a perfect rhythm. On the platform, she slipped on her headphones. The opening chords of an old reggae song drifted into her ears. Instantly, the station changed. The hurried footsteps became percussion. The rumble of the arriving train became bass. Even the rain striking the station roof found its place inside the rhythm. Music had always done that for her. It didn't erase the world. It simply taught her to hear it differently. An elderly woman standing nearby noticed her smile. Good song. Debbie removed one earbud. The best. What is it? Reggae. The woman nodded thoughtfully. I've never listened to reggae. You should. Why? Debbie considered the question, then answered with complete sincerity. Because it reminds you that life doesn't have to hurry. The train arrived. The doors slid open. The elderly woman stepped inside first. Before taking a seat, she turned back toward Debbie. I think I'll try reggae tonight. Debbie bowed. I hope you like it. The train pulled away from the station. Outside the windows, Seoul slipped past like watercolor paintings blurred by rain. Apartment buildings, parks, bridges, office towers. Every neighborhood carrying its own story. Debbie rested her forehead lightly against the cool glass. She wasn't thinking about work, deadlines, or presentations. She was watching the city wake up. Sometimes she wondered how many people were falling in love at that exact moment. How many people were saying goodbye? How many dreams were beginning? How many were ending? Perhaps that was why advertising came naturally to her. She understood people, not because she had studied them, but because she cared about them. Several stations later, the recorded announcement echoed softly through the carriage. Gangnam Station. The doors opened. The city breathed in. Debbie stepped onto the platform. She had no way of knowing that somewhere above her, in one of the tallest buildings in Seoul, a man named Kang Ji-hoon was about to begin a meeting that would leave him wishing, if only for a few minutes, that he could trade his entire world for one ordinary walk through the rain. The man behind the glass. The headquarters of Kang Holdings rose above Gangnam like a polished shard of black glass, reflecting the city instead of revealing what lay inside. From the street it looked untouchable. Successful. Perfect. Inside, perfection had a price. The elevator climbed in complete silence. Floor 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. No music. No conversation. Only the quiet hum of machinery lifting a handful of executives toward the highest floor in the building. No one looked at Kang Ji-hoon. Not because they disliked him. Because they respected him and perhaps feared disappointing him. The elevator doors opened. A receptionist stood immediately. Good morning, Vice Chairman Kang. Ji-hoon gave a small nod. Good morning. How's your son feeling, Ms. Lee? She blinked. He's much better, sir. I'm glad. The conversation lasted only a few seconds. Yet after he disappeared down the corridor, another receptionist whispered, he remembered. Ms. Lee smiled softly. He always remembers. People often misunderstood Ji-hoon. They saw the expensive suits, The luxury cars, the reserved expression, and assumed arrogance. The truth was quieter. Ji-hoon simply carried too much responsibility to waste words. His office overlooked nearly all of Seoul. The Han River curled through the city, like a ribbon of silver beneath the clouds. Rain softened the skyline until the tallest buildings seemed to disappear into mist. Some executives admired the view. Ji-hoon rarely looked at it. Beautiful things were difficult to enjoy when your mind never stopped working. His assistant, Yoo Sung-min, entered carrying a tablet. Your schedule, sir. Board meeting at 9. Investment committee at 10:30. Lunch with the Singapore delegation. Charity foundation meeting. He turned another page and hesitated. And tonight, Chairman Kang has requested your presence. Ji-hoon's eyes lingered on the final line. I'll be there. Nothing in his voice changed, but Sung-min noticed the slight tightening of Ji-hoon's grip on the tablet. He had worked for him long enough to recognize the signs. Chairman Kang never summoned his son for pleasant conversations. The boardroom was already full. 12 executives. A polished walnut table. Fresh coffee untouched. Large screens displaying market forecasts and international acquisitions. The room fell silent as Ji-hoon entered. No dramatic entrance. No speeches. Simply quiet authority. The meeting began. Numbers filled the screens. Profit margins. Expansion strategies. Foreign investments. Each executive delivered carefully prepared reports. Ji-hoon listened without interruption, making notes in a leather notebook and occasionally asking a question so precise it revealed he had already read every report before entering the room. No one could bluff him. Not because he was suspicious. Because he was prepared. Nearly an hour passed before one executive smiled confidently. Our projections suggest we can reduce staffing by 12% while increasing quarterly returns. Several people nodded. The numbers looked impressive. Ji-hoon remained silent. He closed the report. How many employees? The executive looked confused. Sir, 12%. How many families lose an income? The room became still. The executive hesitated. I don't have that figure. Ji-hoon answered for him. 318. Before we celebrate savings, we should remember those numbers have names. No one spoke. The proposal was quietly withdrawn. Outside the boardroom, Sung-min smiled to himself. People called Kang Ji-hoon cold. If only they knew. The man they feared had just protected 318 strangers from losing their livelihoods, and he had done it without asking for credit. Back inside his office, Ji-hoon loosened his tie just enough to breathe. His phone buzzed once. Then again. The screen displayed a single name, Father. He didn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, he walked to the window. Rain slid down the glass. Far below, umbrellas drifted through the streets like moving flowers. People hurrying to lunch. Students laughing beneath shared umbrellas. Someone carrying flowers. Someone carrying coffee. Ordinary lives. He wondered, not for the first time, what it might feel like to have one. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. Yes. The voice on the other end was measured, controlled, impossible to read. Come home tonight. I'll be there. The call ended. No goodbye. No explanation. Ji-hoon slipped the phone back into his pocket. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes. He wasn't afraid of difficult business deals. He wasn't afraid of powerful rivals. The only man who could still make Kang Ji-hoon feel like a son instead of a leader. The little cafe between two worlds. There was a saying Mr. Choi liked to repeat. The best coffee shops are never on the busiest streets. Moonbeam Cafe sat exactly where it belonged. Hidden. Almost invisible. Nestled between an old bookstore whose wooden shelves leaned slightly with age and a stationery shop filled with journals waiting for stories. People rarely found Moonbeam by accident. Someone always brought them there. Then they kept returning. At precisely 11:48 every morning, Debbie walked through the little blue door. The tiny brass bell overhead announced her arrival. Ding. Without looking up from the espresso machine, Mr. Choi smiled. You're 3 minutes late. Debbie laughed. You timed me. I've timed everyone for 15 years. That's slightly terrifying. It's called customer service. She leaned against the counter. I thought customer service meant remembering people's orders. Mr. Choi looked offended. I do both. One iced vanilla latte. For iced Americanos. And he reached beneath the counter and produced a small paper bag. One cinnamon pastry. Debbie's eyes widened. I didn't order that. No. You forgot to. She laughed so hard that two university students looked over. I absolutely did. You always do on Wednesdays. How do you know it's Wednesday? Mr. Choi shrugged. You're humming reggae. You only hum reggae on Wednesdays. Debbie blinked. Do I? You've done it every Wednesday for almost 2 years. I've never noticed. Mr. Choi handed her the pastry. The people who know us best usually notice the things we don't. The cafe smelled of roasted coffee beans, warm vanilla, and fresh bread. Rain tapped softly against the windows. A young couple shared one slice of cheesecake. An elderly man quietly worked on a crossword puzzle. A university student had fallen asleep over an open textbook. Everything about the cafe whispered instead of shouted. It felt less like a business and more like a pause. Mr. Choi carefully arranged the drinks inside a sturdy cardboard carrier. 5 cups. Perfectly balanced. As Debbie reached for her wallet, Mr. Choi gently pushed it away. The pastry is on the house. I can't let you do that. You already are. She sighed dramatically. You know one day I'm going to win. When that day comes, I'll probably be retired. I don't think Moonbeam exists without you. He paused. His smile became quieter. Every place learns to live without the people who build it. The sentence lingered between them. Debbie looked at him. You say strange things sometimes. So do you. She gathered the coffee carrier, balanced the umbrella beneath one arm, and tucked her notebook into her bag. Mr. Choi, if you could give one piece of advice to someone my age. He pretended to think longer than necessary. Finally, he answered, pay attention. To what? The people who make you feel peaceful. She laughed. That's your advice? It's free. I should ask for a refund. Come back tomorrow. I'll have a better answer. She pushed open the cafe door. The bell rang again. Rain greeted her once more. Across Gangnam, on the 72nd floor of Kang Holdings, Ji-hoon stood looking out across the city. His lunch meeting had ended early. His assistant approached. The driver is waiting. Ji-hoon remained silent. Then he did something no one expected. Send him home. I'll walk. There was no explanation. No discussion. The assistant simply bowed. Outside, Ji-hoon stepped into the rain. No security. No umbrella held over his head by an assistant. Just a man walking, breathing, listening to rain strike the pavement. He passed a street musician playing an old jazz standard on a saxophone. For reasons he couldn't explain, he slowed his pace. He dropped a bill into the musician's open case. The musician bowed deeply. Thank you. Ji-hoon returned the bow. No, thank you. He continued walking, not realizing that less than 3 blocks away, Debbie Seo had just stepped out of Moonbeam Cafe carrying 5 cups of coffee. Destiny, patient as the rain, had already begun counting the final steps between them. The crosswalk. The rain had settled into a gentle rhythm. Not the kind that sent people running. The kind that persuaded them to walk a little slower. Gangnam seemed softer beneath a gray sky. Neon signs shimmered in puddles even though it was only afternoon. Office workers stepped carefully around umbrellas. Cyclists glided between taxis. The city continued its endless dance, completely unaware that somewhere near the busiest crossing, 2 ordinary days were about to become one extraordinary memory. Debbie balanced the cardboard carrier with practiced confidence. 5 cups. Well, 4 and a pastry. She smiled. Mr. Choi had one again. The paper bag rested neatly on top of the carrier, filling the air around her with the warm scent of cinnamon. A cool breeze swept between the buildings. She tightened her grip on the umbrella. The reggae music in her headphones shifted to a song her father used to play on Saturday mornings. Without realizing it, she began humming. People passed her in both directions. No one paid much attention, except a little boy holding his mother's hand. He looked up. You sing nice. Debbie pulled one earbud out. What was that? I said you sing nice. She smiled. Thank you. His mother bowed politely before guiding him across the street. For some reason, that tiny compliment stayed with Debbie. Sometimes children said exactly what adults were too busy to notice. 3 blocks away, Ji-hoon folded his umbrella as he approached the same intersection. He rarely walked through crowds. Not because he disliked people, but because people usually reacted to his position before they reacted to him. Employees bowed. Business owners hurried outside to greet him. Drivers recognized his face from magazines. It was exhausting. Today, no one seemed to notice him. He found that strangely comforting. He stopped at the crossing and waited with everyone else. A university student adjusted his backpack. An elderly couple quietly shared one umbrella. A delivery rider checked the address on his phone. For a brief moment, Kang Ji-hoon became just another face in the crowd. The pedestrian signal remained red. Debbie reached the opposite side of the intersection at almost the same moment. Only 30 feet separated them now. Neither one looked up. She was carefully adjusting the coffee tray. He was watching raindrops gather along the edge of his umbrella. The crossing signal chimed. The crowd moved as one. Hundreds of strangers stepping forward together. A river of umbrellas flowing between towers of steel and glass. Debbie smiled as she walked. Don't spill the coffee. That's literally your only job. As if the universe had been listening, a courier on an electric bicycle clipped the edge of a puddle. Water splashed across the crosswalk. Several pedestrians instinctively stepped aside. Someone bumped Debbie's shoulder. Not hard. Just enough. The cardboard carrier tilted. Time slowed. One cup slid toward the edge. No. She reached. Too late. The cup slipped free. The lid burst open. Coffee arced through the air in a graceful brown ribbon and landed squarely across the front of a charcoal suit. Silence. The city kept moving. But for Debbie, everything stopped. The first thing she noticed wasn't the expensive jacket. It was the white shirt beneath it, perfectly pressed and now wearing a wide stain of dark coffee. The second thing she noticed was his face. Calm. Not angry. Not surprised. Just watching her. Debbie's heart sank. Oh, no. She bowed so quickly she nearly dropped the remaining drinks. I'm so sorry. I wasn't paying attention. I was paying attention. Clearly not enough. She closed her eyes for one hopeless second. Great, Debbie. First the coffee. Now you're arguing with yourself. Ji-hoon looked at the stain, then at the young woman standing in front of him. Her curls had escaped from beneath her umbrella. A tiny raindrop clung to one loose strand near her cheek. She looked genuinely horrified, not embarrassed or afraid, simply worried that she'd ruined a stranger's day. He found himself asking the first question that entered his mind. Did you burn your hand? She blinked. What? The coffee. She looked down. Only then did she notice several drops of hot coffee on her fingers. I didn't even realize. He reached into his coat pocket and removed a neatly folded white handkerchief. He offered it to her. She stared at it. You want me to use your handkerchief? You need it more than I do. She accepted it carefully. Their fingers brushed for the briefest moment. Neither pulled away immediately. The world around them rushed forward. But for one quiet heartbeat, the crosswalk belonged only to them. A black luxury sedan eased quietly to the curb. A tall man stepped out, dark suit, sharp eyes. He stopped the instant he saw Ji-hoon's jacket. Sir. His gaze shifted toward Debbie. Protective. Alert. Not hostile. Simply assessing. Debbie suddenly understood. He's important. Very important. She immediately reached into her bag. I'll pay for the dry cleaning. Ji-hoon looked at the coffee dripping from his sleeve, then back at her. It's only a suit. She frowned. That's easy for the owner of the suit to say. For the first time that day, for the first time in several weeks, Kang Ji-hoon laughed. Not politely. Not because business required it. A real laugh. Warm. Unexpected. Even his bodyguard looked stunned. He had heard that laugh only a handful of times in 10 years. Never because of a spilled cup of coffee. Names. For a few moments, neither of them moved. The crosswalk emptied around them. Umbrellas drifted past like colorful sails carried by an invisible tide. The countdown signal flashed red. 3, 2, 1. Another wave of pedestrians began gathering along the curb. Yet Debbie and Ji-hoon still stood facing one another. Debbie looked down at the ruined jacket. I really am sorry. You've already said that. I know. And you meant it. I did. Then there's nothing else to apologize for. She stared at him. Most people would have complained. Some would have demanded compensation. Others might have made the moment as uncomfortable as possible. Instead, he seemed almost amused. She held up the uneven coffee carrier. I was supposed to bring 5 coffees back. Ji-hoon glanced at the empty space where the fallen cup had been. Looks like 4. And one very disappointed coworker. Perhaps they'll survive. She laughed. I work in advertising. We don't survive without coffee. That's serious? Worse. Before coffee, we're capable of making terrible decisions. What happens after coffee? We just make expensive ones. He laughed again. The sound surprised even him. The bodyguard looked discreetly away. He had known Kang Ji-hoon for nearly a decade. He had watched him negotiate billion-won mergers without changing expression and face dangerous men with calm composure. Yet here he was, laughing because of a woman he'd met less than 2 minutes ago. Debbie finally remembered she was still holding the white handkerchief. A faint coffee stain now marked one corner. Oh no. I've ruined this too. Ji-hoon accepted it. I think it was sacrificed for a worthy cause. She smiled. I owe you a suit and apparently a handkerchief. I'll recover. You don't sound convinced. I've survived worse. The sentence escaped almost absent-mindedly. For the briefest moment, something passed across his face. Not sadness. Not anger. Memory. It was gone before Debbie could understand what she'd seen. She decided not to ask. Instead, she offered her hand. I'm Debbie. Then she laughed. I should probably say my full name.
Seoul.
My friends call me Debbie. Ji-hoon looked at her outstretched hand. Very few people offered to shake his hand anymore. Most bowed. Some hesitated. Others seemed intimidated before they spoke. He took her hand. His grip was firm. Gentle. Kang Ji-hoon. She repeated it carefully. Ji-hoon. Not Mr. Kang. Not vice chairman. Just Ji-hoon. It sounded strangely natural. She tilted her head. You have one of those faces. He blinked. I'm not sure that's a compliment. No, listen. You look like someone who forgets to have fun. He raised an eyebrow. And you know this after 2 minutes? I work in advertising. We notice people. And what else have you noticed? She pretended to study him seriously. You iron your shirts. I do. You polish your shoes. I do. You drink coffee less successfully than I do. He looked down at the stain, then back at her. I'll have to improve. You'll need practice. I'll choose a safer teacher. She placed one hand over her heart. I'm wounded. The rain eased. Clouds shifted just enough for a sliver of sunlight to spill between the buildings. The wet pavement shimmered like scattered glass. Debbie noticed it first. Look. Ji-hoon followed her gaze. The sunlight caught the raindrops still falling from the trees lining the boulevard. For a few fleeting seconds, the entire street seemed to sparkle. People hurried past without looking. Taxi drivers kept driving. Phones kept ringing. Only Debbie stood still. It's beautiful, she said. She wasn't talking to him. She was talking to the moment. Somehow, that made it even more beautiful. A vibration broke the silence. Ji-hoon's phone. The screen lit up. Chairman Kang. He looked at the name, then locked the screen without answering. Debbie noticed. She didn't ask. Everyone carried burdens. She had learned that long ago. You didn't have to know someone's story to respect the weight they carried. She checked the time. Her eyes widened. Oh no. My team is going to think I joined another company. So will mine, he said. Neither of them wanted the conversation to end. Neither understood why. Sometimes the heart begins recognizing someone long before the mind catches up. After the rain. For a brief moment, neither Debbie nor Ji-hoon moved. The conversation had reached that quiet place where neither person could think of a reason to stay, yet neither wanted to leave. Around them, Gangnam continued exactly as it always had. Taxi doors opened. Traffic lights changed. Office workers hurried toward afternoon meetings. The city had no idea it had just introduced two strangers whose lives would soon become impossible to separate. Debbie adjusted the cardboard coffee carrier. 4 cups remained. One empty space stared back at her like an accusation. She laughed softly. My coworkers are never going to let me forget this. Ji-hoon glanced at the missing cup. I suspect they'll forgive you. You've clearly never met people in advertising. Are they that unforgiving? They're wonderful. But before their first coffee, they become very dramatic. He nodded thoughtfully. That explains a great deal. You've met advertising people before? I've approved enough campaigns to recognize the symptoms. She pointed toward him. I knew it. You're in business. What gave it away? You answer questions like someone who's used to boardrooms. And what exactly does a boardroom sound like? She straightened her posture and lowered her voice. Let's circle back after reviewing the projections. He smiled. We'll revisit that next quarter. She grinned. Let's maximize synergy. He answered immediately. Pending stakeholder approval. They both burst into laughter. It was the easy kind of laughter usually shared by old friends, not strangers standing in the rain. The bodyguard checked his watch. He had no intention of interrupting, but Ji-hoon's schedule had already begun unraveling. He quietly stepped closer. Sir, your father called again. The warmth in Ji-hoon's expression faded almost imperceptibly. I know. He asked if you received his message. He sounded urgent. I'll be there. Debbie politely looked away. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Some conversations deserved privacy. Still, she noticed the change. The laughter disappeared from his face like sunlight slipping behind clouds. Ji-hoon turned back toward her. I should go. She nodded. So should I. I guess this is goodbye. Perhaps. She tilted her head. Perhaps. The city isn't that large. She laughed. It feels very large when you're trying to find one person. I've heard stranger things have happened. She studied him. There it was again, that almost smile, the one that never completely appeared. She wondered what it would look like if he ever laughed without holding anything back. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. Brightline Creative. Her name. Her email. Her office number. If you decide your suit deserves professional compensation, send me the bill. He accepted the card. His fingers brushed hers again. Thank you. Although I'd understand if you never wanted coffee again. He looked down at the dark mark across his shirt. I don't think coffee is the problem. No, I think bicycles are. She laughed. I'll send the courier an invoice. A breeze carried the scent of rain-soaked trees through the intersection. Thin beams of sunlight slipped between the buildings. The city glittered. Debbie looked up. You know, I think Seoul is prettiest after it rains. Ji-hoon followed her gaze. I've lived here my whole life. I don't think I've ever stopped long enough to notice. She looked at him with gentle surprise. You should. The words were simple, but they landed somewhere unexpectedly deep. She adjusted her bag. I really have to run now. He nodded. I know. She bowed politely. It was nice meeting you, even under slightly caffeinated circumstances. It was. She took several steps backward before turning toward her office. Halfway across the sidewalk, she glanced over her shoulder. He was still standing there, watching her disappear into the crowd. She gave one small wave. He returned it. Then she vanished behind a sea of umbrellas. Ji-hoon remained exactly where he was. The bodyguard waited patiently beside the sedan. Sir? No response. Ji-hoon's eyes rested on the business card in his hand.
Seoul.
Beneath it, someone had written a sentence in blue ink. People remember how you make them feel. He turned the card over. Blink. Simple. Honest. Without realizing it, he slipped the card into the inside pocket of his jacket instead of handing it to his assistant with the rest of the day's business cards. That tiny decision would become surprisingly important. Across Gangnam, Debbie hurried through the revolving doors of Brightline Creative. The receptionist looked up. "There you are. Why are there only 4? Debbie smiled despite herself. "It's a surprisingly long story. Sometimes the people who change our lives arrive with great fanfare. Most of the time, they arrive carrying nothing more extraordinary than an umbrella, a cup of coffee, and a name we'll find ourselves repeating long after they've walked away." Neither Debbie Seo nor Kang Ji-hoon realized they had already begun carrying a piece of one another. The rain had stopped. The city had moved on. But somewhere just beneath the surface, 2 golden threads had quietly begun weaving themselves together. Home. Night settled gently over Seoul. The rain had finally surrendered. The streets still shimmered beneath neon signs, each puddle holding a tiny upside-down city. Office lights blinked out one floor at a time. Restaurants filled with laughter. The scent of grilled meat drifted through narrow alleyways. Somewhere, a saxophone played beneath an overpass. The city exhaled. Another ordinary day had ended. For almost everyone. Debbie stepped off the subway carrying her worn leather bag over one shoulder. The station was quieter now. Even the announcements seemed softer. She walked the familiar route home, passing the bakery that was already preparing tomorrow morning's bread. Mr. Han looked up from kneading dough. "Long day." She smiled. "The kind that starts ordinary and refuses to stay that way." He laughed. "Those are usually the interesting ones." The apartment smelled wonderful before she even opened the door. Curry chicken. Kimchi jjigae simmering gently on the stove. 2 countries. 1 kitchen. 1 family. "You're home." June called from the living room without looking away from his laptop. "You sound disappointed." "What? I was hoping Mom would make me wash the dishes before you got here." "Dream bigger." Marcia appeared carrying a bowl of rice. "Wash your hands. And tell us why you walked in smiling." Debbie stopped. "Was I smiling?" Marcia and June answered together. "Yes." Dinner began the way it always did. 3 bowls. 3 cups of tea. 3 people talking over one another. June was describing a documentary assignment. Marcia was explaining why her students had somehow convinced her to try a viral dance challenge. Debbie laughed until tea almost came out of her nose. "You? I need video evidence." "It will never exist," Marcia said. Somewhere between laughter and dessert, June looked directly at his sister. "So, you met someone?" Debbie froze. "I met lots of people. Not like this." "You've smiled 17 times since you came home." "I have not." "I counted." "You counted?" "I got bored." Marcia quietly stirred her tea. "What was his name?" Debbie nearly dropped her spoon. "You 2 have created an entire person from one smile." "So there was a person," Marcia said. Debbie sighed dramatically. "Fine. There was a man." June raised both fists. "I knew it. It wasn't like that. I spilled coffee on him." Silence. Then June burst into uncontrollable laughter. "You what?" "I spilled coffee." "On him?" "Yes." "The first time you meet a man?" "Yes." Marcia covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Debbie pointed accusingly. "You are supposed to be on my side." "I am," Marcia said. "I'll be on your side after I finish laughing." Eventually, the laughter faded. June wiped tears from his eyes. "So what happened?" Debbie smiled despite herself. "He asked if I'd burn my hand." The room became quiet. Marcia noticed it first. "He asked about you?" Debbie nodded slowly. "Not the suit. Not the coffee. He wanted to know if I was okay." Marcia exchanged a glance with June. Neither spoke. Sometimes a single sentence reveals more about a person than an entire afternoon. Later that night, Debbie stepped onto the tiny balcony carrying a mug of chamomile tea. The city stretched before her. Millions of lights. Millions of stories. She opened her notebook. The pages fluttered in the cool breeze. She found a blank page. At the top she wrote, "Wednesday." She rested her pen for a long moment. Then slowly she wrote, Some strangers feel familiar before you even know their name. She stared at the sentence, read it twice, closed the notebook, and smiled. Not because she understood what she was feeling. Because she didn't. Sometimes life whispers before it speaks. Across the city, Kang Ji-hoon's sedan rolled through iron gates. Beyond them stood the Kang estate, traditional Korean architecture, perfectly trimmed pine trees, stone lanterns glowing softly beside a koi pond. Beautiful. Quiet. Lonely. A servant opened the front door before the car stopped moving. "Welcome home, young master." Ji-hoon nodded politely. The title never sounded like home. It sounded like responsibility. As he walked through the silent halls, one thought kept returning. A laugh. A cardboard coffee tray. A woman who had looked at him as if he were simply another stranger in the rain. For reasons he couldn't explain, he reached into his pocket. Debbie's business card was still there. He looked at it once, smiled, then slipped it back into his jacket. Outside, the wind stirred the pine branches. Inside, Chairman Kang waited. On the low wooden table between them lay a file that had remained unopened for 20 years. The golden threads had crossed. Now, the past was beginning to pull. The chairman. There were no security cameras in the tea room. Not because the Kang estate lacked security. Quite the opposite. Every hallway, gate, garden path, entrance, and exit was watched, recorded, protected. Only one room remained untouched. The tea room. Chairman Kang believed there were conversations too important to be overheard, even by machines. Ji-hoon removed his shoes before stepping onto the polished wooden floor. The room smelled faintly of cedar, green tea, and old books. A single bonsai tree rested beside the open window. Rainwater still clung to its leaves. Chairman Kang was already seated. His silver hair was neatly combed. His dark hanbok fit with quiet elegance. He didn't look like the head of an empire hidden in the shadows. He looked like a retired university professor. That illusion had protected him for decades. Without speaking, the chairman poured tea into 2 small porcelain cups. The sound of liquid meeting porcelain echoed softly through the room. Only after placing 1 cup before his son did he speak. "You walked today." It wasn't a question. Ji-hoon accepted the tea. "I did." "You dismissed your driver." "Yes." "You were late." "The rain." Chairman Kang looked out the window. "The rain has never made you late before." Ji-hoon said nothing. Silence filled the room. Neither man rushed to break it. They had learned long ago that silence often revealed more than conversation. Finally, the chairman lifted his teacup. "How was the board meeting?" "We rejected the restructuring proposal." "The one involving layoffs?" "Yes." "Why?" Ji-hoon answered without hesitation. 318 families. The chairman nodded once. A leader should know exactly what his decisions cost. "You've learned that." Ji-hoon inclined his head. "I learned it from you." For the first time, something almost resembling regret crossed the chairman's face. "I wonder." Outside, a breeze stirred the maple leaves. Chairman Kang reached beside him. A thick brown folder rested on the floor. Its edges were worn. The paper inside had yellowed with age. He placed it gently on the table. Not dramatically. Almost respectfully. Ji-hoon recognized the government seal immediately. This file was closed. It was. 20 years ago. Yes. Why reopen it now? The chairman folded his hands. Because someone has started asking questions. Who? I don't know. Do we know what they found? No. Another silence. Longer this time. The chairman slid the folder toward his son. Open it. Ji-hoon untied the faded string holding the file together. Inside lay an old black and white photograph. Not a young man. Not a recent image. A government identification photo taken nearly 30 years earlier. A man in his mid-30s. Sharp eyes. Gentle smile. Intelligence badge clipped neatly to his jacket. The name beneath the photograph read, Seo Min Jae. Ji-hoon studied the face. This is him. The chairman nodded. The last confirmed photograph ever taken. Ji-hoon turned the page. Mission reports. Travel records. Redacted names. Entire paragraphs covered in black ink. One page stopped him. Across the top, stamped in red, missing. Not deceased. Not terminated. Not retired. Missing. Ji-hoon's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. I was told he died. So was everyone. But truth has a habit of surviving longer than lies. Ji-hoon continued reading. The final page contained only one handwritten sentence. No signature. No date. He trusted someone he should not have trusted. Ji-hoon read it twice. Who wrote this? Chairman Kang shook his head. We've been trying to answer that for 20 years. The room fell silent. Outside, the rain began again, softly, patiently, as though the city itself had chosen that exact moment to listen. Ji-hoon closed the file. He had no idea that only hours earlier he had stood in the rain with the missing man's daughter. Nor did he know that tucked safely inside his jacket pocket, beside his heart, was her business card. 2 names. One afternoon. A connection neither of them could yet see. But somewhere beyond the rain, the first golden thread had tightened. The photograph. The tea room went quiet again. Not the awkward kind of silence you get with strangers. More like the kind between 2 people who know that saying the wrong thing too fast can mess everything up. Chairman Kang reached for the teapot and topped off both cups. Steam curled up slowly before fading into the cool evening air. Ji-hoon glanced back down at the file. The photograph sat right on top. Seo Min-jae, mid-30s. Government ID clipped neatly to his jacket. His expression wasn't harsh. Wasn't proud either. Just calm. The kind of calm you see in someone who's already made peace with tough decisions. Ji-hoon stared at it a bit longer. There isn't much here. There wasn't meant to be. Chairman Kang kept his tone steady. The official file was rewritten before sunrise. Ji-hoon looked up. By who? I've spent 20 years asking that. Rain tapped lightly against the roof. Somewhere in the house, a grandfather clock chimed. Neither of them moved. After a moment, Ji-hoon flipped the page. Travel records. Classified reports. Whole sections blacked out. Every answer seemed like it had been wiped clean on purpose. Only one page hadn't been touched. A handwritten field report. The paper was old, slightly yellowed. The ink had faded, but one line was still clear. Trust is easiest to destroy from the inside. Ji-hoon frowned. His handwriting? Chairman Kang nodded. The last confirmed thing he ever wrote. Another page. Blank. Another. Still blank. Then, tucked neatly into the back cover, a photo that had never made it into the official record. Ji-hoon unfolded it carefully. 5 people stood by the Han River over 20 years ago. 4 faces had been scratched out. Only one was left. Seo Min-jae, smiling, looking past the camera. On the back, just a date and 2 handwritten words, keep watching. Ji-hoon felt something unexpected. Curiosity. Not the work kind. Something more personal. Who wrote that? And why go through all that trouble to hide it? He closed the folder. What do you want me to do? Chairman Kang didn't answer right away. He looked out toward the rain-soaked garden. When I was younger, he said quietly, I thought every mystery had an answer. He picked up his teacup. Getting older changes that. Some mysteries don't go away. They just wait. Silence settled in again. Then came the instruction that would change things. Find out who's been asking questions. Ji-hoon nodded. And if I find them? Chairman Kang's face didn't give anything away. Listen first. Then decide if they're an enemy. That caught Ji-hoon off guard. It didn't sound like the man he grew up with. For a second, he wondered if the old man was looking for the truth or something closer to forgiveness. He stood up, picked up the file, and gave a respectful bow. As he turned to leave, Chairman Kang spoke again. So much of history. Ji-hoon paused at the door. Depends on who lives long enough to tell it. Outside, the rain had picked up again. Ji-hoon tucked the file under his arm. As he slipped his hand into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushed against a small business card.
Seo Dabin.
He smiled without really thinking about it. Same last name. Seo. Probably just a coincidence. At least, that's what he told himself. He slipped the card back into his pocket. Across the city, Debbie stood on her balcony, watching rain blur the lights of Seoul. She had no idea that just a few kilometers away, someone had opened a file with her father's name on it. She closed her notebook, finished her tea, and quietly said to the empty night, "I hope he's okay." She wasn't thinking about her father. She was thinking about the guy whose suit she'd ruined. The city stayed quiet. The rain kept falling. Somewhere, buried under years of silence, an old story was starting to wake up. The city remembers. Long after midnight, Seoul remained awake. The trains ran less often now. The sidewalks were quieter. Office towers surrendered one floor at a time to darkness. Yet the city refused to sleep. It simply changed rhythm. Rainwater still clung to the streets, turning every traffic light into a watercolor painting beneath passing cars. The Han River carried tiny reflections of bridges that seemed to float above the water instead of crossing it. Somewhere, a saxophone drifted through the cool night air. Not loud enough to interrupt the silence. Just enough to remind anyone listening that even lonely cities still sing. Moonbeam Cafe stood dark now. Its chairs rested upside down on polished wooden tables. The espresso machine had finally fallen silent. Only one light remained. Mr. Choi's. He moved slowly behind the counter with the care of a man who believed every object deserved respect. He polished cups that were already clean, straightened chairs that were already straight, and folded towels no customer would ever notice. People often thought he was cleaning. He wasn't. He was saying goodnight. Every cafe had a personality. Moonbeam happened to enjoy ending each day with dignity. He paused beside the front window. Rain traced gentle paths down the glass. Beyond it, the same intersection where Debbie and Ji-hoon had met only hours earlier shimmered beneath the streetlights. Mr. Choi smiled. So, he whispered to no one in particular. It finally happened. The words disappeared into the empty cafe. No explanation followed. No dramatic music. Just an old man smiling at a crossing. He reached beneath the register and opened a small wooden drawer. Inside lay dozens of forgotten things. Scarves, gloves, an old fountain pen, a child's toy train, a silver earring. People always forgot something. Mr. Choi believed cafes collected memories as much as customers. He gently placed one new item inside the drawer. A neatly folded white handkerchief. The one Ji-hoon had used after the coffee spill. A faint brown stain still marked one corner. Mr. Choi looked at it for a long moment, then quietly closed the drawer. One day, someone would ask about that handkerchief. Just not tonight. Across the city, Debbie slept peacefully. Her notebook rested on the bedside table, still open to the page she'd written before bed. The ink hadn't quite dried. A soft breeze drifted through the open window, lifting the corner of the page just enough to reveal the sentence beneath. Some strangers feel familiar before you even know their name. Miles away, Ji-hoon's bedroom overlooked a perfectly still garden. The file on Seo Min-jae remained unopened on his desk. He had read every page twice, yet one question refused to leave him. Who had rewritten history? His gaze drifted toward the chair beside the window. His jacket hung neatly across the back. The coffee stain remained. The house staff would normally have taken it away for cleaning. Tonight, he had told them to leave it. He couldn't explain why. Perhaps because removing the stain somehow felt like erasing the afternoon. Outside, rain began once more. Gentle, patient, almost familiar. The narrator spoke one final time. Cities remember people differently than photographs do. Photographs remember faces. Cities remember footsteps. Today, Gangnam remembered too. The reggae guitar returned. A single Korean string answered. The melody lingered like a conversation that wasn't ready to end. The screen faded slowly to black. One sentence appeared in elegant gold lettering. Every night, Gangnam tells a different story. Until next time, every night tells another story. Gold Thread Studios, where every story begins with a single thread. Chapter 13, The First Thread. The rain returned just before dawn. Not with thunder. Not with wind. Just a soft curtain of water settling over Seoul, washing away yesterday's footprints while quietly making room for tomorrow's. The city stretched, yawned, and began again. Debbie woke before her alarm. She wasn't sure why. For a moment she simply lay there, listening. Rain tapped gently against her bedroom window. A bus sighed to a stop somewhere below. Someone laughed in the alley. A delivery scooter buzzed past. Home. She smiled, then frowned. Why had she dreamed about a man she'd only known for 5 minutes? She buried her face in the pillow. This is ridiculous. I don't even know him. She laughed at herself. In another part of Gangnam, Ji-hoon hadn't slept much at all. The file on Seo Min-jae remained open on his desk. Beside it lay a simple white business card.
Seo Dabin.
He picked it up again, turned it over. Read the handwritten sentence once more. People remember how you make them feel. He found himself smiling, not because of the words, but because he could still hear her laughing after spilling coffee all over his suit. He quietly folded the card back into his wallet. Not his jacket, his wallet. Without realizing it, he had already decided it was something worth keeping. At Moonbeam Cafe, Mr. Choi unlocked the front door at exactly 6:30. The bell above the entrance chimed softly. Ding. He breathed in. Fresh coffee beans. Warm wood. Morning rain. Perfect. He tied on his apron and switched on the espresso machine. Steam hissed gently through the cafe. Another day. Another 100 conversations. Another 100 stories. He glanced toward the window overlooking the crosswalk. A knowing smile crossed his face. Let's see what today brings. Brightline Creative was already alive with the sound of keyboards and half-finished ideas. Debbie hurried through the entrance carrying a replacement tray of coffee. Her coworkers looked up. One empty desk waited. She placed the drinks on the table. I come in peace. Her creative director looked at the tray. There are 5 today. There should have been 5 yesterday. Everyone laughed. One coworker leaned back in his chair. So, she immediately pointed at him. No, I haven't even asked the question. I already know the question. Another designer grinned. Who is he? Debbie froze. What makes you think there was a he? 3 people answered together. Your face. She covered it with both hands. Am I really that obvious? The room erupted in laughter. Across town, Ji-hoon's assistant entered his office carrying the morning schedule. Good morning, sir. The legal team is waiting. The Tokyo conference begins at 10. The chairman requested an update. Ji-hoon nodded, then almost absent-mindedly asked, Do you know a company called Brightline Creative? His assistant blinked. They handled our autumn campaign 2 years ago. Ji-hoon looked up. They did. Yes. Would you like me to arrange a meeting? Ji-hoon looked toward the rain outside his office. He smiled to himself. No, not yet. The narrator's voice returned, warm and unhurried. Some meetings change our future in a single moment. Others don't reveal their meaning until much later. Neither Debbie Seo nor Kang Ji-hoon knew it, but yesterday had already become the first chapter of the rest of their lives. The music swelled. Reggae guitar. A gentle Korean gaegeum answering each phrase. Rain. The heartbeat of Seoul. On screen, Debbie's notebook. Entry 2. The world becomes smaller when someone you've just met crosses your mind more than once. She closed the notebook, smiled, and walked into another rainy morning. End of episode 1. Every night, Gangnam tells a different story. Until next time, every night tells another story. Gold Thread Studios, where every story begins with a single thread.